Welcome to Real Girl Talk. I am your host, Sherry Ricard. I empower women to stand in their purpose, to succeed despite the odds stacked against them, and to live their life knowing they're enough and worthy. Join me each week for powerful messages and interviews that will inspire you to create the life that you want. Now let's go. Hello there, my friends. It's Sherry Ricard, and I am so glad to have you back listening to the podcast. Thank you for being here. I have a special guest. She is a knowledgeable lady boss today. Her name is Nicolette Victoria, and Nicolette's impressive. She has a BS degree in psychology, a master's in industrial organizational psychology, and she doesn't only have studied emotional and mental abuse, but she's actually lived it. And she's here to tell her story in hopes that it'll help other women living in this chaos and or recognize signs of an abuser. Welcome, Nicolette, to the show.
Thanks so much for having me here. I'm so excited.
Yes. And your story, girl, I've heard your story before. And, we actually tried to tape this show before and we didn't. Our sound quality wasn't so great. So it was too good not to re-record. And so I want to be able to have these women listening to you because it is so important. I think a lot of people think just because you're not being physically hurt, you're not being abused. And it's just not true. I mean, emotional and verbal abuse, whether it's short-term or long-term, can leave some really long-lasting effects on women, and they need to be able to recognize the signs of that. And even though you studied it, like we said, you actually lived it. And so I want you just to kind of tell everyone a little bit about your story, how you started having a relationship with somebody that had some type of abusive behaviors towards you, and just kind of take us on that journey and where you are today.
Okay, great. So I was in a relationship for about 2.5 years, and for the first maybe 5 to 6 months of it, it went really well. It honestly seemed like it was perfect. I thought I had found my person. I was finishing up grad school, and I was so excited because I had thought I found my perfect person. And we ended up moving in together, and that's pretty much when everything started to go downhill. And I started to notice it kind of slowly, and I thought the behaviors were off, but then I still kind of questioned myself because everybody has their issues, and I usually try to figure out why somebody is acting the way that they are before judging them for that. But initially, what I wish I would have recognized was the first part of it was, it's called love bombing. So oftentimes in relationships, if you're in a relationship with someone who is either narcissistic or sociopathic, they'll often love bomb their partners in the beginning of the relationship, and that's where they just shower them with love. For me, this was this person taking me to all these like really nice fancy places around the city that I was moving into, and I was just like, oh, okay, like I grew up super poor, so I was like, oh, okay, maybe this is what people that have money do. I didn't realize like, okay, this is not normal for like a second date. So, and that's something where they, like the person who's narcissistic or sociopathic will do that in order to kind of like hook their partner in. Then after that, the abuse starts to take place. Also in that first stage, that's often called idealization, where they try to portray themselves as literally the perfect partner for whoever they're with. And it's not real. After that, then it moves to devaluation, and that's where they start to devalue the person. And it often starts really small, and it could be something maybe like a joke that you're like, ooh, like, was that really a joke? Because that it stung a little bit too much, and you might just brush it off. I know I did. I was just kind of like, hey, that hurt my feelings when you said that. And that's something that if someone thinks they're in a relationship with someone who has one of these personality disorders, that's like a boundary that they can test for, because often somebody who has one of those personality disorders generally doesn't respond to that how someone like someone who doesn't have it, someone who's more emotionally healthy. Because for people who are emotionally healthy, if someone we cared about brought that up to us, we would feel so bad that we hurt their feelings.
Right.
Where with someone who is a narcissistic or sociopathic, they'll say like, oh, you're being too sensitive, or like, I didn't mean it. And they just brush it off.
Gotcha.
So a big sign is lack of empathy. So that's what I noticed. And it's not
Hmm.
just lack of empathy, but often they don't feel empathy or remorse at all. So for me, I started noticing it with this person, calling me names. Oh, like going into rage. It's called narcissistic rage, where they just like snap and
Hmm.
like fly off the handle and go into rage. So it lasted, honestly, like I noticed it with at the beginning, well, after like 6 months after we moved in together,
Mm-hmm.
but and then I stayed in the relationship for another like 2 years basically, which looking back on it, I kind of wondered, like how did I get there, or why did I stay that long? Especially because a lot of my, like I had conducted research and published research on abuse, and I had also worked in domestic violence shelters. So I had seen this over and over, where women would be with their abuser, come to the shelter, back and forth, back and forth. And I always wondered why, why do they keep doing that? So
I've
then
often wondered that myself.
yeah, it's like when from the outside, you're like, what are you doing? Like, why would you not leave? Why would you let someone treat you like that? So for
Right.
me, I'm like, how did I get wrapped up in this? And I started researching it, and I learned something called trauma bonds. And basically what happens is when you're in that type of relationship with someone who is either narcissistic or sociopathic, it's almost like being addicted to a drug. The way that your body reacts is similar to a drug addiction, where with that person, when they show you love, our bodies release oxytocin, and then also dopamine in response to love. So love and happiness.
Right.
So it's like when you're receiving that from that person, it's like you're getting that hit of oxytocin or dopamine. And then when they're abusive, that's taken away. And it's almost like you're just waiting for that next hit of oxytocin or dopamine in order to feel good again. And when you feel that, like that little bit, it's like your body gets almost like addicted to it.
I
And
wonder, do you think that that is more susceptible for women? And if so, why? Because I don't see that so much, or maybe I'm just not looking for it in men as much as you see it in women.
personally, I don't have experience with, I haven't ever read research, or I don't know any men who have experienced it. So I'm
Yeah.
not saying it doesn't happen to them, but the prevalence in women, it's like when I started talking to people about my past relationship, so many other women would contact me and be like, hey, I don't really talk to anybody about this, but I had this relationship. I think it has to do with a couple of different things. One, the way that women are socialized, where and I think that this is changing, which is a positive thing, but I think that women are more likely to put up with that behavior based on like a man's income or something like that, because they think that they need that income or need that support in order to be okay. I know that personally I saw this in my childhood, and I contribute that to a big reason why I stayed in it. It's just a pattern that people see and that
Hmm.
I saw on repeat, where it happened for generations in my family,
Hmm.
where women were with abusive men. And I saw it with my mom and dad growing up. And then when they divorced, I remember seeing my mom crying over bills. Like there was no way that she was going to be able to pay these bills on her own. And
Right.
then when my stepdad came into the picture, then that went away. So I internalized that as that I had to have a man in order to be okay financially, and that there was no way that I would be able to take care of all of my bills and my children and really just the lifestyle I wanted to live on my own. So I think that pattern tends to repeat itself, and we have to be self-aware and realize that's what's happening in order to break that cycle.
And that's interesting because so at what point did you get where you said you're talking about breaking that cycle, and you obviously did. At what point did you recognize, listen, this is a situation that is not going to get any better. How did you set yourself up to leave? Because you know as well as I do, the first thing women that don't have a financial resource other than their husband will say is, I have no way to leave. I'm stuck, especially if there's children involved.
What finally clicked for me was realizing that it really wasn't ever going to change. So I really tried looking at everything I possibly could, like, okay, maybe this person's acting this way because of what they saw growing up or something like that. And if they recognize
Mm,
that, then maybe they would behave differently. So I tried working with this person on that. And then finally, I just realized, I don't think this is necessarily just a behavioral issue. I really do think that this person has a legitimate personality disorder. And I was like, duh, like I heard about these, I read about them and studied them over my 6 years of education in psychology. It finally clicked that I was like, I think this is really what it is. And I
wow.
just kind of thought maybe I kind of like blamed myself and I was like, I don't know if I can do any better than this. Like, cause I heard growing up, like, I really needed to just snag a man with a good income. Like that,
Right.
that was my goal. Nothing else mattered. So I was like, this person has an advanced degree and a good job. And I'm like, am I ever going to be able to find another one? And I grew up in a town, or technically a village of 380 people. So that was rare there. But once you get out, you're like, okay, like a lot of people have that. That's definitely not, that's not rare.
Right.
And so seeing that, and then also realizing that that's really not the most important thing. I worked with an empowerment coach and she helped me see that I really, like, I was in control, and she helped me take my power back and really realize that I could take care of everything on my own, that I could pay for all of my own bills. And looking back on it now, it seems kind of silly to me that that was that I was like really holding on to it for like $500 in rent.
Right.
It was just realizing that I had the power to make the choice to change. And
Right.
on top of that, the ultimate thing was realizing that wasn't God's best for me.
Hmm.
I was talking with a friend, and she had just kind of said it in passing about a decision that she was making within her career, and she was like, "And that's just not God's best for me." And I was like, "That's actually like I need to apply that to my life."
Hmm.
So I looked at this relationship, and I was like, is this God's best for me? And the answer was a hard no. Like, there's no way that I was put on this earth to suffer and be treated like that by the person who's supposed to protect me and love me and support me. So
Right.
once I realized that, I was like, I'm out. And I told him that it was over. We were breaking up. Before I decided to leave, I actually went to a local domestic violence shelter and I talked to them about developing a safety plan. I think that's incredibly important. Oftentimes, I mean, I know I've had these thoughts before towards other women who have been in similar situations where I'm like, just leave. But that's often the most dangerous time when the men may harm them or they're most likely to get murdered, which sounds
Hmm.
a little extreme, but they don't want to let the woman go. So it is very important to develop a safety plan. So I talked to a local shelter about that, just making sure that I had a good plan in place. And I also talked to some people who were close to me. That was my boss at the time, one of my coworkers who I was really close with, and then a couple other close friends, just so that other people were aware. I wanted them to know what was going on, so that way they were, they would check in on me and just make sure everything was still okay.
Sure. That was a great plan. So that's good advice for women that are in this situation to check with their local shelter or even call. I know that there's a website, womenshealth.gov, and you can go to the emotional and verbal abuse section, and there is a hotline there. And they can too help you with some type of plan and put you in contact with some of the locals that are able to help you. So that was really smart, Nicolette, on your part to do that safety plan or that escape plan, rather. And so, what do they do? How do they plan that with you? Give us some ideas and tips of things that you discuss in order to create that kind of plan.
So the place that I went, and I volunteered in another shelter in Southern Illinois, and I know their process was similar. But basically, what they'll do is they will assess the situation and the risk of the situation. I know there are some women who are in situations that I consider and that maybe the shelter considered to be more risky or more dangerous than mine. For example, women who are in situations where they're literally fearing for their lives. Maybe their
Mm,
partner has told them that if you leave, like I'll kill you, which is very real. And
right.
in those situations, what I have seen happen is that they will help the women exit and go into either an emergency shelter, or like they can stay in the shelter, or some sort of safe transitional housing. And these shelters are amazing. They have great security. I know the one that I volunteered in, you had to go through two different doors to get in, and there was a camera outside. You had to identify yourself. They were very careful about making sure that there was no way the abuser was going to get in the door.
Right. Oh,
Aside
oh.
from that, it also depends on the financial situation that the woman is in. For
Mm-hmm.
me, I'm grateful that I've had a good paying job. So that wasn't as big of a concern for me, but maybe for someone who doesn't, or maybe she's been a stay-at-home mom and she's like, I don't have the financial resources. There are resources available. There are different grants. I know some of the shelters can help with hotels. If you're staying in a hotel, they can pay for that. They have food available. Basically every need that a woman could have when she's exiting, the shelters are capable of providing all of those resources, or putting her in touch with someone who can help ensure that those resources are covered both for her and her children.
That's good. That's really good information. And I want to be sure and share this number with all of the listeners too. If you think you're in a situation that you need to get out of, or you're just not sure, or you're embarrassed to talk to your family and friends, and I think Nicolette would agree with me that a lot of times that's where women are. They don't want to share that they're being abused, or they think they're being abused, because they're convinced that they're being silly anyway, because that's what their abuser does, is convince them that they're nuts and not them. But it wouldn't hurt just to call and talk to someone that's educated and experienced, and works with women that have abuse. So you can call the helpline for womenshealth.gov, and it is 800-994-9662. Again, that's 1-800-994-9662. And if you go to their website, another cool thing that I like is they have a button that says escape. And a lot of times abusers will monitor what you're looking at on your website. And if you're on this website, you can hit this escape button and they won't be able to tell where you were on your computer, which I think is amazing to do that. It's not even something that I would think about, because I can't even imagine staying with someone that's abusing me, but I can certainly see how that's so real for so many women. I can see it. I've seen it happen. I know people that it's happened to, and it's really sad. And Nicolette, you're amazing. Your story is amazing. And tell us how you are today, because I love a happy ending to the story, and I know that you're doing wonderful.
Oh my gosh, it's like complete opposite of what it was about 6 months ago. When I first left, I had a lot of health related issues because of the stress of being in that relationship. I mean, I had always been someone who was working multiple jobs and got straight A's, and I was still had like a great social life and was really involved in my community. And I would go from like 5 a.m. until like 10 or 11 at night. And I just was like, okay, I guess I have to get in these like 6 hours of sleep so I can get up and go the next day. And throughout this relationship, who I was, I just kind of like died on the inside. Like my
Mm,
spirit died. My energy was completely gone. People that were close to me had reached out and asked if like I was okay, because they're like, your sparkle and your sass is gone, and like your smile looks fake. And I was just drained. It was like
yeah.
it took everything in me just to get up and go to work for 8 hours and come home. And then once I finally made the decision to jump, it was insane. I was like, I don't know how this is going to work, but I prayed about it. And like, I'm huge on like prayer and manifestation and like law of attraction. So I prayed about it, and I felt like I was supposed to give a 30-day move out notice, and then just take over the lease. Like take over the lease, give a 30-day move out notice, and then be done with it. This was the
Right.
beginning of July of 2018. And I had nothing lined up. Like, I had been looking at condos for months. Nothing was working out. The next day, I'm like, okay, I'll pray about it one more time. And if I feel the same thing, I'm just going to go for it. And I was terrified. So I was like, are you sure, God? Like, I don't know about this, because it usually takes it takes a while to close on a property. So
Right.
that's what I felt again when I was praying. So I had met the person I was previously in a relationship with, signed the lease break, and gave the 30-day move out notice. And right after that, like, I literally left that meeting and went to the condo that I'm living in right now.
That's
So like,
wonderful.
it was so easy. Like, God made it so easy for me. And as far as affording it, like, I did not have money saved up for it because I was not planning on it at all.
Right.
My realtor and mortgage company were amazing, and they helped me with a program. Basically, there was a program available for if you were like under a certain income. And for me, a single person with no kids, it was under 77,000. So it's not like it was even a really low number.
Right.
Um, and it was in areas where they are wanting people to move into. So I was able to qualify for that. And then that helped me move in. It's amazing. I love it. So like, my condo, it's literally in the perfect location. It's right outside of Dallas. And I can get anywhere, like uptown, downtown Dallas, within 10, 15 minutes tops. Any of the surrounding suburbs I want to go to, which I often travel to, like for business reasons, and
Yeah.
for my career, I can get to any of them within 20 to 30 minutes. So it's just perfect. My health has gotten so much better. And even the relationships in my life, like, I was so afraid to leave my previous relationship because I had invested 2.5 years, not only with that person, but also building friendships. Like, we had
Right.
mutual friends, and I had a group of girlfriends, and I knew that I was going to lose them in that friend group when I left that relationship. So I was like, I don't want to start over, like, in this big city by myself. It literally happened like in an instant, where all of a sudden, like, after I let that go, it's like there was so much space and energy created for
Right.
friendships that were in better alignment. And now I have all of these amazing girlfriends that are like super driven and super supportive, and they're so amazing. So everything is just so much better now.
Do you find a lot of times that the abuser tries to pull you away from those type of friendships, whether it be a family or friends, they try to pull you away so they can control what you're doing?
Oh, absolutely. I've seen it with a lot of the women who I've volunteered with as well, kind of worked and coached them. And some of that has just been like friends, where oftentimes, like, when people point it out, family or friends might point out the abuser's behavior to you, and then you confront the abuser. Once they identify who's pointing out the abuse, they'll
Mm,
often try to pull the woman away from that, and basically just isolate her. Or they'll tell her that she's crazy. Like, gaslighting is a big thing, and that goes into that too, where they're like, oh, like, I never did that. I never said that. It never happened. Or if it did, like, you were too sensitive, or I didn't mean it. And basically, they'll make the woman think that she's crazy for reacting like most normal, healthy people would to
right.
abuse.
Right.
Definitely.
And you can't change that behavior, right? I mean, true narcissism is that, do you have the ability to change someone's behavior? Or is it just something that if they recognize it in themselves, that they can actually change themselves?
Most of the time, no. Someone who has narcissistic personality disorder, like, we ourselves often can't change those people, and most of the time it's not going to change. The reason behind that being is that self-awareness is so important, and in order to change ourselves, we have to first be willing to admit that we have an issue or that we were wrong. Most people who have narcissistic personality disorder will not admit that they are wrong, ever. Like, they
Mm,
literally are never wrong. So there's a very, very low chance of them actually going to complete therapy to change. And even if they do go to therapy, it's often not successful because of those reasons. So I think
mm.
oftentimes women, like, we will completely drain ourselves trying to nurture someone who we care about, who has one of these personality disorders. But really, if we just realize it is a legitimate mental health issue. And it's not, it's not our job to change those people where most of us aren't qualified to. And even if we are, we probably still aren't going to change that person. So it's not us. Like, we're not crazy. This person literally has a mental health issue.
And so you're really just kind of spinning your wheels. You want to stay with that person because you love them. Maybe you've been with them for, I don't know, 10 years versus 2 years, and you want to stay. But in actuality, it can get worse. And like Nicolette said, it can just drain you. She was feeling it physically, her physical symptoms from the emotional abuse. And just so you ladies know, emotional and verbal abuse includes insults, attempts to scare you, isolate you, and control you. Not necessarily just physical abuse, but those things can lead to physical abuse. So you want to be able to get the help you need, and you can go to womenshealth.gov and you can research there, or you can call their helpline, which is 1-800-994-9662. And thank you, Nicolette. I appreciate your story so much. I know you're thriving, not just surviving. You're doing amazing. You look fabulous. You're just a powerhouse. And I appreciate you so, so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's an honor. I love Real Girl Talk. It's one of my favorite podcasts. You always have great people.
Oh, thank you.
Women, and there's always so many golden nuggets. Like, I listen to it when I'm at work, and I'm like writing down little notes, like at the same time as I'm working. So
that's so good to hear.
With the rest of these women.
I love it. I love that my guests are watching the show as well, or listening to the show as well. And I want to remind everybody before we go off that I'm going to be releasing my new book, Create Your Life. It is a 30-day devotional journal like no other. It's for women who want to empower themselves, step up in abundance, and build a beautiful life. It goes on sale February the 15th. So make sure you go to sherryricard.com, get on the waiting list with the other women warriors so you're notified as soon as it goes on sale. And you're also notified of all the events that I have planned this year. Thank you again, Nicolette.
Of course. Thank you.
And don't forget, ladies, step out of your comfort zone. Keep your encouragement tank full and your faith in God. Until next time.